Beep specializes in the deployment and management of these mobility networks, which utilize shared electric autonomous shuttles. They seat 8 to 10 passengers, are designed to do these, 1 to 2 mile type routes and services to connect, in the case of the tradition community, various ends of the property in residential areas, into the business districts, into the retail districts, and things of that nature. So these live, work, play type communities is being developed at tradition, kind of represent great use cases for residents, businesses, and visitors.
Welcome to CREPN Radio for influential commercial real estate professionals who work with investors, buyers, and sellers of commercial real estate coast to coast. Whether you're an investor, broker, lender, property manager, attorney, or accountant, we're here to learn from the experts.
Welcome to Commercial Real Estate Pro Network's CREPN Radio. Thanks for joining us. My name is Dan Gross. This is the podcast focused on commercial real estate investment and risk management strategies. Weekly, we have conversations with commercial real estate investors and professionals who provide their experience and insight to help you grow your real estate portfolio. Today's interview is sponsored by Building Insurance and Risk. When you invest in real estate, it pays to work with a real estate investor protection specialist to protect yourself and your investment from catastrophic loss. The experts at Building Insurance and Risk focus on real estate investor protection. They provide you with multiple insurance coverage offers and a side-by-side coverage comparison. To learn more, go to buildinginsuranceRisk.com. Today, my guests are Joe Moye and Dan Grosswald. Joe is the CEO that leads Beep's efforts in the safe testing of electric autonomous vehicles to serve the needs of public and private communities. And Dan Grosswald is the president of Mattamy Homes, and he oversees home building and land acquisition operations in Southeast Florida. And in just a minute, we're going to speak with Joe Moye and Dan Grosswald about how Mattamy is creating a blueprint of communities of the futures with Beep's autonomous shuttle network woven into their tradition community in Port St. Lucie, providing equal access to mobility, easy access for shopping, groceries, and more. And but first, a quick reminder: if you like our show, CREPN Radio, there are a couple of things you can do to help us out. You can like, share, and subscribe. And as always, we encourage you to leave a comment. We'd love to hear from our listeners. Also, if you want to see how handsome our guests are, be sure to check out our YouTube channel. You can find us on YouTube at Commercial Real Estate Pro Network. And while you're there, please subscribe. With that, I want to welcome my guest, Joe Moye and Dan Grosswald. Welcome to CREPN Radio.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, appreciate the opportunity.
Well, I am really excited to talk to you. I'm looking forward to our conversation. But before we get started, if each of you could take just a minute and share with us a little bit about your background.
Well, I'm Dan Grosswald, as you said, president of the Southeast Florida division for Mattamy Homes. And I've been in the home building business, mostly in Florida, for the past 30 years. I worked for various large home building companies, developing communities and homes throughout the state of Florida and the Southeast.
And Darren Joe Moye, CEO of Beep, and I guess I'm a serial technology entrepreneur. If I had to describe myself in one sentence, I've been involved in both the investment side and the operate side of startup technology companies for the better part of the last 2 decades. We started Beep 5 years ago, really on the thesis of being able to get out in front of the wave of these autonomous shared electric platforms to change the way we move people and provide an alternative means of transportation in public and private communities. And most specifically in these first mile, last mile use cases where, we have to provide incremental arterial routes to connect people to goods and services in areas like the Tradition community at Mattamy Homes.
Got it. Well, like I said, I'm excited to talk to you guys and doing a little bit of research and just kind of thinking through some of the challenges that you guys face and solve and work through. It's I'm looking forward to our conversation. And I guess the first thing I was thinking first to start with the vehicle, but actually I'm thinking more about the community. So I'll start with you, Dan. With the community, can you tell us a little bit about the size and scope of the communities that you're developing, and kind of a little bit of the back, or I guess kind of the just a little description of what makes up the community that you develop.
Well, we have, communities all across the North America. We're founded out of Toronto, Canada, but we have a U.S. operation that runs from Dallas, Phoenix, Tucson, into the Carolinas and all through Florida. In South Florida, we have multiple communities. Tradition is really our flagship community. It's a 20-year-old community that fell into bankruptcy in the downturn, and Mattamy bought it in 2018, and about 25% of it was developed. It was a very complex deal because of the debt structures that were in place with CDD bonds and other obligations. That it's actually 3 DRIs, 3 major planned developments that are one. And as I said, it was partially built. And it's about 8,200 acres combined. There are ultimately almost 18,000 homes there. There's 22 million square feet of industrial and office space. There's apartments along with the residential, and there's a lot going on there. There's two turnpike or I-95 interchanges there, a massive network of roads and trails.
Got it. And you said it was 25% developed before you guys took over?
Yes, the previous developer, fell bankrupt, and so when we got there, it was still a very large community, but some of it had already been. A shopping center was there, a power center, and a couple thousand homes were in place there.
Got it. And you said 8,200 acres, is that right?
8,200 acres. There's 800 acres of open space and parks, and a lot of homes and commercial development there.
Got it. And I'm just curious, since BEEP deals with the autonomous vehicles, how many miles of roads do you have in 8,200 acres in Tradition there?
I don't know how many miles. I know that we built 15 miles just last year, and expanding the community from one end to the other. And as far as the autonomous shuttle is concerned, we're building a 20-mile long network of trail system that BEEP largely travels on.
And is it independent of the roadway then? Is it its own little path, or?
That's the ultimate goal for the most part. The way we've done it, the way Mattamy's done it in Tradition, is that we're creating a separate trail network with a pathway specially designated just for the autonomous shuttle.
Got it. And Joe, if you could describe a little bit about BEEP and the vehicle that you guys are deploying in the Tradition development.
Yeah, so as I mentioned at the onset here, BEEP specializes in the deployment and management of these mobility networks, which utilize shared electric autonomous shuttles. They seat 8 to 10 passengers, are designed to do these, 1 to 2 mile type routes and services to connect, in the case of the Tradition community, various ends of the property, in residential areas, into the business districts, into the retail districts, and things of that nature. So these live, work, play type communities is being developed at Tradition, kind of represent great use cases for residents, businesses, and visitors. The vehicle itself today operates at about 12 to 13 miles an hour. Covers a range of about 2 to 3 miles in distance, as far as kind of the furthest routes that we serve. The batteries, which are, provided as these vehicles are electric, can operate at about a 5 to 6 hour service before being recharged. And, the whole concept is to take these platforms and, as Dan described it, build a mobility network that gives people an alternative to their personal transportation, and more importantly, provides access and mobility options for people that don't have personal transportation or have difficulties getting out of the home.
Got it. In the use of the autonomous vehicles, is there a regular route that they travel like a regular city bus, or is it more of a like an app and somebody says I need to get from point A to point B and the vehicle shows up to take them there?
Yeah, so it's a great question. The answer is all of the above. So one of the things that's unique about these technologies, and I know we're going to talk a little bit about, the importance of risk and safety as it relates to the deployment of these vehicles, is having a, geo-fenced area or a fixed route type service is a key component of where the technology is today. We have kind of virtual rails that the vehicle travels on, but it doesn't mean it needs to be just a trolley car loop. We can connect routes and redeploy assets into different directions and provide, as you point out, the flexibility of on-demand services. So being able to hail a ride at a particular stop, to get where you want to go. It's not come to my driveway and take me anywhere I want to go, but Mattamy's designed a very convenient network of shuttle stops where it's very convenient for the residents and visitors in the area to access the services.
Got it. And Dan, I'm just curious from Mattamy's point of view, what were some of the thoughts in bringing in the autonomous vehicles to service the community?
So when we acquired the property, which is located in the city of Port St. Lucie in South Florida, there's 70,000 home sites approved for development in this area, and it's one of the fastest growing areas in the country. Very, very popular for people relocating from the Northeast and other parts of Florida. It's a really affordable place to live. But in positioning our community, we wanted to differentiate it from all the rest of these 70,000 lots. We wanted to make it a special place. Mattamy has a commitment to community and making it a great place to live and making a positive impact there. And also sustainability is one of our core values. So putting all these things together, the differentiation, the sense of community and sustainability, it was really just a perfect fit to make tradition a really special place. And that's what attracted us to Beep.
So, and then I guess one of the other things is, as a development, as opposed to like a quote city, where you'd have the, I'm assuming a city bus. I don't know if that's something that the city has available or not, but is there any, or I guess, first of all, I guess the question is, does the city have its own city bus system or any kind of a public transit?
There is public transit. It's not very robust in the western part of the city, and it covers like a wider area. We're trying to provide a smaller network that connects each one of our communities within the master plan community to the downtown and to each other and to a network of parks we have there. So we're able to more specifically provide transportation and the ease of transportation in and out without using your car within the community. So it's more of kind of a micro last mile transportation system than a broad overarching bus system that goes across the whole city.
Yeah,
Got it.
if I could add in, I think, one of the most important aspects of, what we're doing together is, the biggest gap that we have in our country in transportation is this micro transit arena that we're talking about. You can take a bus into downtown, you pick the city, and if it happens to be, New York or the other large metropolitan areas, you may be able to use a subway or another means of getting around. But in most cities and in most communities, in the case of Dan's community, I think it's 17 square miles or 18 square miles. think about taking a bus to get near the community, and then how do you get to your job on the other side of that community? So a big component of this is providing these arterial services, as I call them in Dan's case, to connect residents and make, the whole area much more eco-friendly and convenient from a mobility perspective. But it's also, how do people, that may come from outside the community leverage that network as well to access the various goods and services, including, a major health center that is there on their property, the Cleveland Clinic. So a lot of importance, I think, in looking at the realities that large bus services are not terribly convenient in many of these scenarios, and frankly don't navigate some of these roadways very safely and very effectively.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you shedding light on that, because I was trying to think, okay, how does this compare and contrast to what one might think of as a traditional, transit system, and just kind of that micro focus. I appreciate that. So on as far as the adoption, acceptance, kind of use within the community, Dan, can you speak to how the community's been, how they've responded to the use or the vehicles in the community?
Well, I'll go a little bit beyond that first. We introduced the idea to the city council and the police department, the fire department, a lot of the governmental agencies there, and they embraced it wholeheartedly. The city of Port St. Lucie is pretty progressive in terms of trying to develop better transportation systems. So we started with them, and they were very accepting of it. And as we've slowly deployed the network. And in the first phases, we circled the commercial areas. There's a very large commercial area in the center for shopping and dining and, personal services. So we used it in there first, and it was immediately adopted. We've done a lot of programs to introduce it and explain it to the residents, and it's present in all our community events. And now we're deploying it into individual communities as they open up. And the usage has been very strong and consistent. The only thing that really affects it is sometimes weather or holidays or things like that. But especially during the weekends and the early evenings and things like that, people love to use it to go downtown or to go shopping or go to the dentist. So it's been really pretty easy. Of course, there's always a few naysayers here and there, but I'm sure that happened when the horse and buggy was introduced, and then the car, but that's something you face. But by and large, it's very widely accepted and embraced by the community.
That's great. I'm curious, if somebody's riding, is there a fee they pay to get on, or is it how's the fee structure?
Well, that's a very good question. So the tradition has a series of CDDs, community development districts. So the CDD, and this will also lead into some of your risk questions, but the CDD owns and operates the vehicles or leases them, but they own and operate the system. So people pay CDD fees through their tax bill, and we fund that the whole system through the CDD, so they get to really ride it for free. And that would be open to anybody within the county by law.
No, that's great. And maybe this is more for Joe on the vehicle itself. If I understand, there's no driver on the vehicle. Is that correct?
That's correct. We do have attendants on board the vehicles today because this particular platform is overseen by the U.S. Department of Transportation. They have a program to deploy these types of initiatives like we're doing at Tradition. And so they do require an attendant on board who can take over in the case of the need to manually intervene for any reason, is there to educate and inform, people on the use of the technologies. I think it's safe to say that if a driverless vehicle pulled up in your driveway, you'd probably want to learn a little bit about it before you jumped on it and took it anywhere. And so it is an education process and an adoption process. And a big piece of kind of what the future holds is to shift those attendants to virtual attendants so that they will be remote instead of on the vehicle, and providing, the ability to communicate with passengers. If there's, God forbid, a medical incident or some type of safety incident, you want to make sure somebody can immediately, engage, dispatch, help. Dan mentioned the importance of the first responders and how, they were integrated into this process to train them on the vehicles and how they'll operate in the community. So yeah, they are operating in driverless state, if you will, but there is an attendant on board today as part of the transition to kind of more the human in the loop model.
Got it. And how long has the technology that you guys are using? Is it a particular brand of vehicle? I mean, Beep, you don't manufacture these, is that correct, or is that?
That's correct. We
Okay.
don't manufacture the vehicles themselves. We've got multiple suppliers. This particular vehicle is from France. The brand
Okay.
is called Navia. They were actually recently acquired by a firm called Gasson in France as well, a large industrial equipment manufacturer. But so we import those vehicles, and then, like I said, we operate them under these US DOT guidelines.
Got it. And how long has the technology, I mean, the autonomous vehicles, how long have they been around?
These vehicles have been around for about 7 years. We've been operating in tradition about 3 years now, a little bit over two plus years. And we've been operating in other locations for 4 years since we founded the company. But the vehicles themselves were operating in Europe a few years before we brought them to the US market.
And given the nature of the vehicle, I think you mentioned they travel at 12 miles an hour, 10 to 12 is kind of the rate of speed. Is that right?
That's correct.
I'm just curious, is there a number of incidents, or I mean, I'm just trying to think of what would be the incident where a human would have to get involved. I could see the interaction with the riders or the passengers not understanding maybe what is it, or what are we doing here kind of thing. But as far as the operation, is it been flawless, or have there been any
It
issues?
it operates very effectively in autonomous mode. So the technology itself is, has been advanced and matured over the years. I will say that, some things that are coming in the next generation vehicles, like obstacle avoidance, is a good example. Where do we have challenges today? We've got prescribed shuttle stops, and sometimes you'll pull up and there'll be a FedEx truck in your shuttle stop. Well, the vehicle itself doesn't maneuver around that and find another location to stop. That's a simple, but, not an uncommon example of where, you need to take over brief manual control of the vehicle. And those are, although they sound very simple, those are the types of things that are being solved for as it relates to how would you do that, without an attendant on board in the future. And that is simply initiate a command remotely that, hey, it's safe to maneuver around that vehicle, or, provide whatever type of approval it needs to take a particular action. So probably the most common scenario we see is where, something takes up its space.
I can see that. As far as the expected updates, or the future updates that you're expecting, are those software in nature, or is it a reconfiguration of the hardware? Or?
It's both. So there's, the next generation vehicles, which will be released in 2025. So a couple of short years from now, they'll be much more industrial grade as far as kind of an automotive type platform, although in the shuttle form factor, that'll be able to operate at higher speeds, will, have advanced technology in the vehicle itself and the drive by wire and brake by wire type components, which are really important to make the, the starting and stopping of the vehicle much more human-like, and then secondly, on the software front and the external technology, it's you've really got two competing forces in autonomy right now. You have vision technologies, which are all camera based, much like your adaptive cruise control on a vehicle you may have today. And then you have sensor based technologies that a LiDAR in particular, which emits an image and creates a three-dimensional view of everything you're around it. Today, these vehicles are purely sensor based. In the next generation, they're going to be a combined sensor and camera base, which will dramatically advance its ability to operate in these higher speed, more complex scenarios. And that's been a big kind of piece of what's been advancing over the last several years with a couple of our key partners.
Got it. And Dan, as far as the investment in the vehicles, is there or I guess this could have been for either one of you guys, but I just think with Dan being the community, the one that bought the vehicles, what's the life expectancy, or do you have like a replacement sense of how long before you have to replace the vehicles? Is there a thought process on that, or?
Well, we have I think a life expectancy of 7 to 10 years, but the technology evolves faster than that. So what we're more interested in is keeping up with the trend and improving the service and the quality of the service and the cost of the service. And that's one of the great things about working with Beep is that, in our agreement, they agreed to help us provide the latest technology regardless of the life cycle of the vehicle.
Yeah, that's a really important point, because if you look at like the FTA guidelines for useful life of public vehicles, a shuttle form factor or a van form factor is typically a 5 to 7 year useful life. And to Dan's point, I mean, every 3 years we envision a refresh of the sensor stack and the camera stack potentially. Software upgrades, no different than any other application today. You're going to get those updates pushed often and regularly. So that'll continually stay updated. But the big thing is going to be, do we want to get into an expanded operating domain and need to upgrade the sensor stack to, what we all know will be cheaper and better technology 3 years from now. It's kind of Moore's law in effect.
Yeah. So what have been some of the biggest challenges in deploying the technology and getting the vehicles in the community?
Well, for us, really, the biggest challenge is not the technology, but building the infrastructure, because it's different, and sometimes the city has trouble understanding the meaning of the infrastructure that we're building. They're trying to apply principles and rules that for roads or pathways that don't necessarily apply to the vehicle. So the approval process has been very difficult at times. I don't want to say difficult, but time consuming, and a lot of explaining and teaching and understanding with the cities. So really the slowest or most difficult part is getting the infrastructure built that will allow the vehicle to travel off-road within tradition.
Yeah, and I would just add, it's as these vehicles evolve and continue to, be more broadly utilized in scenarios like we're talking about here, there's a big regulatory and legislative set of actions that need to happen. I mean, the standards in our country, the federal motor vehicle safety standards in particular, weren't written for autonomous vehicles. They were written for driven vehicles. And so 4-decade-old regulation is governing, these new technologies. And we spend a lot of time both educating and lobbying in Washington around this regulatory reform. And we're seeing some progress for certain. But, our country has always been the leaders in these new transformative technologies. And this is one where, we're falling behind other parts of the world as far as attracting those partners here to U.S. soil, because we've been a little slow on the regulatory front.
Yeah, we really are early adopters of the technology. I think we're the only users of autonomous shuttles in South Florida at the moment, although there are several others within the state. But it just shows you that it's not really widely recognized or known or understood from a approval process in the local area of approvals.
Yeah, I'm kind of curious. I would think that as it becomes more well-known and recognized, you guys are probably receiving a lot of attention from other communities looking to adopt the technology or the use of it. Are you finding that to be the case, or?
Yes, we get a lot of interest from other developers wanting to see it. And we also get a lot of interest from ULI, Urban Land Institute, and universities. We've had multiple visits from different University of Miami, FAU, where they, have these people learning discipline of planning or architecture or those types of things, and they want to come visit and see it. So we've had a tremendous amount of people come and visit, see it in operation, and try and learn and understand how this works.
Yeah. And as far as the route, so I get kind of a gate around the community kind of thing, to where I'm assuming the vehicle wouldn't necessarily transfer beyond that or go beyond that. Is it all just programmed in there on the route that it travels, or is there I mean, we talked about, I guess there's both the schedule and then the opportunity to like call the vehicle to pick you up at a certain point. But how is it being used in the community? Is it just basically there's the red shuttle and it travels around the community, or are there specific routes that it travels, or how many vehicles do you have currently in your fleet, I guess would be maybe a starting point.
Yeah, so Mattamy has 6 vehicles operating 3 routes today. They've got 2 additional routes that they'll be expanding to. In fact, launching one later this fall. You made a comment, and it's probably important to point out, because what's unique about what Mattamy has done at Tradition is they actually exit the community and go to a retail area across the road from the community. So it's not just about, getting to our town center and getting to the amenities within Tradition itself. They actually connect to a property they don't own, which, is an important, I think, piece of what we talk about in the form of extending these mobility options. But they've got 6 shuttles operating across 3 routes today. They are, typically running certain hours of operation with the ability to, utilize through an app and on demand. So it's not just, if you miss the shuttle at 3:15, you have to wait, for 30 minutes until it gets back. You can hail a shuttle to know that you're there waiting. So it's those types of technologies and more convenience and demand planning type things that you want to do. There's certain hours of the day where, one route is highly utilized. People want to get into the town center for dinner. So looking at those demand profiles and adjusting the routes and the timetables based on when the ridership wants to utilize the services is an important piece of kind of the continuous improvement.
Yeah, another thing that we like to do is, so we have a very robust entertainment and cultural activities in the town center, and Tradition has a really beautiful downtown center, kind of like old-fashioned Southern Square with a big grassy area in it. And we have events there almost every weekend. So another thing we like to do with the shuttles is we call it like a caravan, where if we know we're having a special event, we can line up the shuttles and bring them from and to certain areas to service the event, because parking is always at a premium at the highest peak times. And the shuttle allows people to avoid having to fight for parking. The other thing it does is, if you want to go downtown and have a few drinks, you don't have to worry about, drunk driving or anything like that. You just get on the shuttle and it delivers you to your community door. So there's a lot of good ways that the shuttle can be used and deployed to service special events, not just like the bus route type of situation.
Got it. Hey, Joe, I assumed that Dan and Mattamy they purchased the vehicles from Beep, but I'm curious, is that the case, or do you guys continue to own and lease and operate them on behalf of Mattamy, or how's?
So we do, I mean, both scenarios across, our customers. In the case of Mattamy, they did directly acquire the vehicles. And I think as Dan described, and he can chat a little bit more about reasons why they did that and why that was important. But then we provide the full service of operating, maintaining, managing, charging, doing everything you need to conduct the service itself.
Got it. Dan, is there anything as far as the owning and operating the vehicles that?
We just did a cost benefit analysis
Okay.
of whether it was better to lease or buy type of thing, and it just made more sense to us to buy. And with the way that Beep operates, they're always willing to help us. We have to worry about obsolescence because of the structure of our contract and the way they like to go about doing business. So that minimizes the downside of actually buying a vehicle that is going to become obsolete in a few years.
Got it. And Joe, Dan had mentioned some of the different organizations and communities that had come to look at the vehicles in operation. I'm kind of curious from your perspective, what are some of the areas that you're seeing growth in this type of use of the autonomous vehicles?
Yeah, so we're seeing growth in a number of use cases. Certainly these master plan communities is a great example of the various types of services that Dan has described, and Mattamy's been a real leader in industry on advancing. We have other similar communities, one up in the Orlando area, one in the Atlanta, Georgia area. The other, primary use cases have been in public transit, where, in downtown urban areas like, Jacksonville, Florida, as an example, like Peoria, Arizona, Contra Costa, California, where we're providing these types of services to really augment public transit, to where, in the example of St. Petersburg, you had a ferry coming across the bay, and then it was a mile and a half to get into the downtown corridor, providing those types of services to link, in that case, a ferry service to the downtown area. The third I would say is campuses. You think of campuses as academic, as business, as medical campuses. All of them have parking challenges, and the opportunities to maybe supply a service that makes it more convenient to get around these communities versus pulling cars in and out. All of those are primary use cases for what we're doing today.
No, I just I love this whole topic, and I would think that it's exciting for both of you. I mean, I would think that there's just a certain amount of excitement when, as opposed to the same old kind of cutting edge, kind of leaning into the new, and I would think there's a lot of happy people that as they see it, you mentioned there's a few dissenters, but I would guess that by and large, there's a lot of happy people that interact with you and the product there. So that's cool.
Yeah. Well, when you buy a home in a large community, the community has an identity, and there's a certain amount of pride and, esteem that comes with living there, and having cutting edge technology like the autonomous shuttle from Beep really lends to that feeling that the person gets by living in tradition.
Yeah. Just occurred to me when you were talking about different opportunities, Joe, or with different communities and campuses and stuff. Is there any kind of weather limitations? You mentioned, I thought like there were certain limitations.
There are some limitations. I mean, it can operate in light rain today. I mean, sometimes, Florida is graced with storms that come through sideways for about 45 minutes every afternoon. And frankly, cars shouldn't be on the road either. So there are some limitations because today's technology is just purely LiDAR based. These next generation platforms, that's a big thing to be solved for, is the fused vision, sensor, and radar technologies. In fact, the higher fidelity radar are becoming more and more a key component of how these vehicles will navigate in the future and deal with things like inclement weather. We don't have snow in Florida, but certainly there's locations all across the country where these vehicles want to be deployed. So we've got to solve for that. And then it goes as far as even things as simple as a spinning sensor that has almost a wiper on it that keeps them clean, much like you would a windshield. So there's all types of technology that being advanced to ensure they can operate in, how did we used to say it about the post men and women, operate in rain, sleet, snow, or hail, or something like that.
I think they've forgotten that. That's not the mailman I have anymore. But anyway, I appreciate you guys. Just what we were talking about here, and I just would think that it's exciting every day to go to work and have some sort of a, the point to introduce or have people comment on or be excited about that. I think that's pretty neat. But anyway,
it is, yeah. As Dan reminds me every day, it's never a dull moment together.
Yeah, that's cool. Hey, if we could, guys, I'd like to shift gears here for a minute. As I mentioned before, by day I'm an insurance broker, and as such, I like to ask my guest a question about risk. And the question is, what's the biggest risk? And as an insurance broker, there's a couple strategies we always try to employ. And the first is we look to see if there's a way we can avoid the risk. When that's not an option, then we look to see if there's a way we can minimize the risk. And if we cannot avoid nor minimize the risk, then we look to see if there's a way we can transfer the risk. That's what an insurance policy is. And like I said, I'd like to ask my guests if they can take a look at their situation and identify what you consider to be the biggest risk. Could be, the laws, the technology, the community, whatever it is that you see might be the biggest risk. And again, while I'm an insurance broker, I'm not necessarily looking for an insurance related answer. And so if you're willing, I'd like to ask you, Joe Moye and Dan Grosswald, what is the biggest risk?
Yeah, I'd be happy to start with that. I think, the autonomous technology and mobility area has it's probably done itself a little bit of a disservice of all the lofty expectations of these George Jetson scenarios of vehicles zipping all around our roadways in autonomous mode. And I don't think it's because anybody was derelict in, their visions. I think it was just the reality that this is a walk before you run technology. One of the things that we've hit on here that's so important is starting with planned route, controlled speed environments where you're able to mitigate a lot of the complex interactions one would typically have on, much more sophisticated or much larger routes for the traveling of a vehicle. The technology is getting better and better every day, as you and I talked about before the call, even applications beyond moving people. If you're moving boxes or luggage or anything else, same type of technology that's being advanced to perceive an environment and be able to navigate a course. And so, I think it's important as an industry that we, evolve this together in these more controlled environments and not set false expectations that these vehicles will be able to go anywhere, anytime, any speed tomorrow. And I think from a risk perspective, that dramatically reduces, the chance that, something would happen. But I'd also say, at the end of the day, and you probably know these statistics better than I, but 43,000 people perished on U.S. roadways last year alone. Incredible tragedy. The property damage associated with that, the quality of life damage associated with that. 94% of that caused by human error, distraction, impairment. These vehicles respond in a scenario 3 times faster than a human can, identifying something and actuating a brake. And they're never distracted, right? They're not staring at an iPhone. They're not going to the town center for a couple of drinks and getting behind the wheel. And that's, that can't be lost in this. This is about, saving lives and reducing risk as it relates to one of the biggest threats, in our country today. So anyhow, that would be my my soapbox speech on that topic.
I would look at it from 3 perspectives. First, the biggest risk really from our perspective is human failure. The vehicle itself and the technology itself is very good, and as Joe pointed out, is better than a human being in terms of its safety factor. Really, what happens is either a human acting from the outside of the system, crashing into it or taking advantage of the vehicle is a risk, not the vehicle or the system. Or when it's not in autonomous mode, it's actually riskier than when it is in autonomous mode. Sometimes the vehicle has to be manually moved, so the risk factor increases slightly there over when it's in autonomous mode. But the other 2 things, so we decided purposefully to create the dedicated path for the reasons that Joe mentioned earlier. So that helps us minimize the risk that it's not interacting on an open road or a parking lot system as much as it otherwise would be if we didn't have the trails. So we did that for a reason. And finally, we've decided to have the CDD operated. So from a developer point of view, having the CDD own and operate the vehicles gives us, some sovereign immunity from what we would otherwise be exposed to as a corporation. So that's kind of how we viewed the risk and how we've tried to mitigate or transfer it, as you mentioned earlier.
I love the thought put into all that, as far as your answers and also the way you guys are actually operating that. That's cool.
Yeah. Thank you.
So to wrap up here, Joe Moye and Dan Grosswald, where can the listeners go if they'd like to learn more or connect with you?
Well, MattamyHomes.com is available to you. If you drill down in that website, you'll find Tradition, or you can come visit us in Port St. Lucie on Tradition Parkway and I-95.
Yeah, Beep can be found at ridebeep.com and similar Twitter and LinkedIn connections. So Google that and you'll find us.
Awesome. Well, Joe Moye and Dan Grosswald, I cannot say thanks enough for taking the time to talk today. I've enjoyed it, learned a lot, and look forward to doing it again soon.
Right.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, appreciate it.
All right. For our listeners, if you like this episode, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Remember, the more you know, the more you grow. That's all we've got this week. Till next time, thanks for listening to Commercial Real Estate Pro Network's CRE PN Radio.
You're listening to CRE PN Radio for influential commercial real estate professionals. For more information on this or any of our guests, like us on Facebook, CRE PN Radio.